Finance leaders are under pressure to do more with less and to be more strategic while still closing the books on time. AI has the potential to solve this, but how do you apply it in the real world? To help us explore that, we're joined by Glenn Hopper. Glenn leads AI research and development at Aventis, teaches in Duke's CFO program, and consults with finance teams on how to modernize with AI. He's also the author of Deep Finance and AI Mastery for Finance Professionals. Today, Glenn and I will talk about how finance functions are being rebuilt with AI, what the future CFO looks like, and how even mid-market companies can adopt AI with confidence and impact. Glenn, welcome to Just Curious.
Stuart, thanks for having me.
Let's say I'm the CFO of a small or medium-sized company. I have a lot on my plate. Why should I be focused on AI?
Yeah, I think the knee-jerk answer that a lot of people would give here is, efficiency. You can do more with less, and people start immediately trying to find ROI and how they're going to reduce headcount. And I've been very careful from the beginning to avoid that, and because I think that we've been asked as finance teams. I mean, everybody is resource constrained, but I think of how we've spent our time historically and how incrementally this has improved before AI, even with technology and with automation. All the things we used to spend our time doing, making manual journal entries and just sort of the data entry part of what we did used to take up a much bigger part of our jobs from accounting all the way through finance. And I think, nobody goes and get a master's in accounting or a master's in finance because they love to be a data entry specialist. And the better the technology gets, the more we can spend time actually doing the work that we enjoy doing, not the sort of lower end of the spectrum of work. So AI is just the latest way that we're going to automate the easier tasks and bring real value and spend our time focusing on these, what are for now really human elements of providing that strategy and analysis and moving us beyond the, sort of that moniker that finance and accounting have carried for a long time of being a cost center, but where we are actually valuable partners to the business. And AI is just another tool to do that. I heard someone the other day describe using generative AI as like having an exoskeleton. So we're still doing the same work we are, but when we're able to apply generative AI at it, we just get that much more efficient. So it's like giving us a superpower.
Many CFOs want to modernize but don't know where to start. How do you guide finance teams through a first AI project?
Yeah, it's so I get this all the time where someone will hear me out talking about AI and they'll hear me talk about the benefits and what it can do. And they'll come to me and in a lot of ways it seems like generative AI is this like shiny fishing lure that it gets people, it has their attention. Everybody's talking about it right now. And if you don't really understand or if you haven't used it before a lot, in a work capacity beyond just, small, sort of toy projects, then it's easy to kind of picture it as this magic wand that's going to solve all of your problems. But a lot of times when companies come to me, depending on where they are in their data maturity, I will tell them we can make AI our end goal, but we have to get a foothold or a handle on BI before we can do AI. So we start with, let's look at your data dictionary. Let's look at your data governance. Let's look at the ground data that we're starting with. What is your source of truth for this information? What are the KPIs that you're measuring? Do you have the right definitions? Are you measuring the right things? Where is your data coming from? And so to get started in AI, you really have to back up and go down to that foundation and really focus on the data and how you're using it, how you're collecting it, and where you're applying it there. And then there's, you kind of go through the phases of data maturity of, you start out kind of ad hoc reports, pulling things together, putting them in Excel and doing them as requested. And maybe month after month or quarter after quarter, you're reporting things a different way. And you kind of move up the scale to where maybe you have your first sort of data warehouse or data lake and you're aggregating it. You start getting a handle on it. And then you go from sort of doing the first pass at descriptive analytics where you're saying, okay, we have a snapshot of our data and this is where we are and this is where we've been. We can segment our customers. We can see what our churn was. And then you move kind of higher up in that into, okay, now we can use that data to train models and do some predictive analytics where we can say, based on historical trends, this is where we think we're headed. And then beyond that, it's okay, we see where we're headed. And now we've identified the levers to pull that actually can change that. So it's on a spectrum and you have to meet clients where they are. I mean, some, could be a SMB that's maybe doing, 12 or 15 million a year and they're on QuickBooks and they've never gone into the data world. And some could be a mid-cap company that they might even have, a data science team, but they're machine learning specialists or whatever their background is. But how can we elevate them even further? There's a spectrum, and we meet clients where they are. But I think what's really exciting to me is when I find someone who does have that high level of data maturity and does have the team, and they're still finding benefit of how generative AI can help.
Yeah. And just to kind of play that back, the key to starting a first AI project is to have your data in order.
Yeah, absolutely.
And begin to actually organize, clean the data, begin to use it, and then you can begin to explore how can we use generative AI, to do things that we couldn't have done with our BI dashboard. But the key is to have your data in the right place, in the right shape, et cetera.
Yeah, and the only difference I would add there is even for companies who are there are still, there's still advantages to be gained. But the interesting thing is no matter what the size of the company is, I feel like it's very rare that I talk to a company that's like, oh yeah, our data is completely clean. We know exactly what we're doing with it and how to use it and all that. So it does seem like even if they're higher on that data maturity scale, we do have to go back and sort of evaluate and make sure because AI is only as good as the data that it has. So garbage in, garbage out. So it always starts with that evaluation, no matter where you are.
Yeah. You've talked about moving from data wrangling to insight. What does that shift look like, either on a week-to-week basis and for a mid-market finance team?
Yeah, so data wrangling is it's still when you're in that ad hoc and sort of definition phase and where if you don't have an automated pipeline where you're spending a lot of your time pulling in data from disparate sources, and if you haven't defined clearly your KPIs, maybe you're pulling or your sources of truth, even you're spending a lot of time sort of pulling data in from these different areas and then cleaning it up to use it. And then a lot of data wrangling too is around unstructured data and pulling it in and not knowing what to do with it or how to use it, or the lack of consistency around it. So it's about stepping back to see the big picture. And then even with unstructured data, you can handle it in a systematic way. And it's just how you're storing it, how you're retrieving it, what you're doing with it. You're converting it to JSON or whatever you're going through there. But if you have consistent, it's unstructured, but it's similar, and you've got kind of the JSON format that you're doing or whatever. And then, so instead of spending all that time reinventing the wheel and like everything is a bespoke and a one-off where you are taking the data, treating it in the same way, and then actually spending the time doing something with it rather than gathering it and defining it and reinventing the wheel, I guess, as I said.
Yeah. What do you say to companies that think that AI is too expensive or too complicated for their teams?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. I mean, I hear there's a lot of clamor in the media about, oh, you got it, finding your ROI on AI, and it's like, well, you're not going to be Bloomberg. You're not going to train your own, company specific large language model unless you're, one of the top 100 companies in the world. You're not, I mean, that doesn't, so you're not investing millions of dollars or more on training a model. You're talking about using tools that are out there. So if it's too expensive, because we're talking about either software subscriptions, or if you are going to build something internally, maybe that's where the debate is, where if someone comes to me and they want a very bespoke tool that is going to be integrated in their workflow and going through and talking to all their data and everything, because there are some things that we can sort of standardize and productize, but a lot of times it's very bespoke implementations. And if we come back with a quote and they say, well, that's more than I want to spend on it, that, spending more on building kind of a custom tool right now is saying that you want to invest, you don't want to wait and spend the time to take the next year or 2 years or however long it takes for the NetSuites and the, SAPs and the other tools in our finance tech stack to actually implement it into their applications. And I think that, so the question is, can you afford to wait? If you can afford to wait, then we can do just some small spend stuff, and we could have your team on a closed, like a Microsoft or an OpenAI like enterprise account, or we're doing something in your Azure environment in Microsoft, or we're doing something in Snowflake. So there are smaller projects that you can do, and if you're looking for ROI on it, it's the same. It's, as a former CFO, this is funny to say, but ROI on investing in AI is more than just, can it save me headcount, or how's it going to increase my revenue? And I think there are ways you can do both of that, but really the ROI on it is the same thing as investing in sort of business intelligence. And the how do you come up with the ROI of being able to make better informed kind of data driven decisions? And instead of going from a hunch, if you say, I wonder if we do XYZ because I've been in the business, we've got our expertise and our experience and we can have hunches and we can try them out, but it sure would be nice to have to kind of go from that hunch to a hypothesis because you got data to back it up. So, I think that can you afford it right now, or can you afford not to? It's like, well, how much do you trust your information that you have right now? If you're making decisions and you're not informed because you don't have access to the data and you don't have these tools, then you probably don't see the value. But if you have seen value from making data driven decisions and having these tools, I think it's easier to sell the advantages of the technology.
Yeah. Speaking of BI and ROI, you built AI copilots and chat interfaces for finance. What do they enable that your traditional dashboards don't?
Yeah, so I don't want to just talk in cliche, but this is really what it comes down to for me. So we've been talking about democratization of data for 20 years now, for a long time. But the barrier to entry for doing something with that data used to be, okay, my finance team, they can either wait and get reports from the data scientists or from, whoever is able to write SQL queries and access the data and pull it to them, or they have to learn how to write SQL queries or whatever. Or give them, you have to give them some kind of tool where they can pull the data. And then if that's great, they get the data, they can dump it into Excel because that's what finance people use. But to do more sophisticated modeling, you could use tools like R or Python. But how many people on your finance team know how to use R or Python? But now with generative AI, to me, one of the greatest advantages of it is it makes English or whatever your spoken natural language is become the new programming language. So you can get access to the data just by querying in natural language instead of select star from, blank where blank and writing out these SQL queries. You can just say, hey, my cost of sales, this account is, 20% higher this month and out of trend, and our revenue, doesn't match what's going on there. And if you've got your general ledger data loaded in and you have a tool that can go in and query that data, it could go and pull out the information without having to write a SQL query, without having to dig through however many transactions are in your GL. And it could tell you something very easy like, you paid this vendor twice this month and it's a time, or you booked something wrong or whatever. And it's kind of like, a lot of people are familiar with robotic process automation, which was a very painful to set up. It was neat when it worked. I mean, you could automate a lot of steps but it was rule based and it didn't have contextual awareness. And the tools that we're building right now, where if I can give you access to your data and do that with a chat interface instead of a command line where you're writing prompts, then that is really valuable because then whether you're someone on the FP&A team or a C-suite person or whatever, when you can interact with that data, and then so you're getting, you have your canned information that's in your dashboard. And if you've got a great dashboard, maybe you can drill down like 3 levels there and get to it. But if you can't ask it questions, and what you can do when you implement generative AI in it is something that maybe just had to be a report that you'd get from your BI team. You'd have to wait, you'd have to get in line, behind everyone else and get this report. Now you can ask that directly of your data directly from that dashboard.
Yeah. Sounds awesome. As someone who, is curious about the finances of my business and what's causing them to go this way or that, it sounds like a incredibly useful layer. And to your point, like one that democratizes the ability to kind of call on that data because you don't need to use Python. You don't need to understand R. You can just ask questions in the language that you use, whether that's English or what have you. Tell us a little bit more about your Finance Intelligence Accelerator project. What problem is it set out to solve?
Yeah, so we have a tiered approach depending on how big the company is and what sort of their data environment is. And I'm super excited right now because some stuff that we were kind of having to address with brute force in the past, the model context protocol from Anthropic that OpenAI has now adopted, and sort of the new, like the agent SDK, that there's some really cool things that are going on that I think is going to make this even easier. But the problem we're trying to solve is exactly what I just said, where in a lot of cases, people, maybe they've got an instance of BI or some Tableau or whatever, where they're just pulling kind of, APIs into their CRM and their GL and or ERP or whatever tools they're using, and they kind of just pull the standard metrics and everything. But I think about all these dashboards that people use and or the ones that come built into the ERP, valuable, but they're static, and you look at it every day. As soon as you pop up NetSuite or whatever tool you're using, you see kind of your same dashboard that you see. And if there's something red and flashing, you think, oh, I need attention for that. But otherwise, you kind of just gloss over it the same way you drive by, billboards on the interstate. But if you have something that is proactively and intuitively going through and looking at the data, so I think about that example I gave earlier, where you've paid a vendor. Twice in a month. A human may miss that, especially if you've got however many invoices you've got, and just with your AP schedule or whatever, they came in and you booked it wrong to the when you close the month, or whatever the case is, you're relying on a person to go back and find it. But with AI proactively going out and looking at that, 24/7, or just running a cron job report that goes and looks for anomalies like that, it can pull this information and flag it up to you. So what we're trying to solve was two things. One is spotting discrepancies before you might, so before we talk about trying to be in this sort of continuous close process with our financials. And some companies, are using tools that let them do that. But most of the companies that I work with don't have the really, they're closing as fast as they can, but there's still the process they go through at the end of the month. And if there's things that you can do during the month that will spot these anomalies and these discrepancies, it does save time. And then instead of just getting sort of a static information, if you can then turn around and interact with the data and ask questions of it, I mean, that's going to a whole new level. And then when you go to, if you need, someone on your team to look at it, or if you're the person on the team, you've got somewhere to start rather than, well, great, now I've got to pull up the GL and just go through it and look through all this myself.
Yeah. And so the Intelligence Accelerator, the Finance Intelligence Accelerator, integrates data across multiple systems, whether it's QuickBooks or perhaps Excel. Maybe you're using a CRM like HubSpot, and then it allows you to create analyses using this like integrated data. Is that like a fair like representation of the accelerator?
Yeah, and the big thing for us was I wanted to, there's the ETL process of getting data, but my thinking with this was, rather than just going through, because you can set up APIs to any of these software platforms and go pull the information, but we pull everything down into a database, and depending on if you don't have a lot of data, we just throw it in a regular database with tables and whatever format works. But companies with bigger data, and especially if they have a data lake or warehouse or whatever, and they're using something like Snowflake, there's some built-in tools in Snowflake that really make this a lot easier. But either way, if we can pull the data and have sort of these rules applied when we're looking at it all together, rather than just actively going out and querying the information when we have together, we can put our rules in place and look at it all together. And that's where we're setting up the AI to do this to the client. It doesn't matter, if you're pulling your dashboard or whatever, you don't realize if we're pulling data daily or if you're getting live data or whatever. And really this setup is more for, we run it daily. You're not getting the live information as much, because that's kind of just too much to handle. But the solution, or the convenience of that is, when we look at it aggregated, we can see the impact from one system to another. And if there's a discrepancy between our different sources of information and all that, it's just being able to, in an aggregated way, look at all the information and query it with generative AI has really been pretty amazing to see the impact that we're having by doing it this way.
Yeah. You mentioned MCP just now. For finance leaders who aren't familiar with MCP, one, tell us what it is, but then secondly, tell us like how this can unlock new forms of value going forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing with Model Context Protocol is you have to build these servers for it and everything, but it is a protocol, which means it's a standardization. So, you have, I think in our tech stacks that we work with our businesses, they all have APIs, but you've got to go and map the API. And when I'm without MCP, when I'm querying a database, I have to have sort of this RAG, retrieval augmented generation implementation, where here's a document that has your database schema. And so if somebody types a natural language query, it has to go look at this document, and then through generative AI interpret what that schema is and write the query to pull the right information. We're pretty good at that. But with the interesting thing is with model context protocol, whether you're going to an API or you're looking at data in a database, or maybe there's a website that doesn't have an API that's publicly accessible. With this model context protocol, it is letting generative AI go out and try to determine what is the way to get this data. So all the mapping that you do when you sort of do your API linkages, even without that, the idea is that using this model context protocol, that the generative AI can figure it out and go get that for you. So if we have servers for everything, it's lets things automatically integrate without having to have something like Fivetran or whatever. If we're consistently using this protocol across the industry, it's going to make it so much easier. Because I think of all the different, and I keep referencing NetSuite, but like inside NetSuite, if you go and you try to query and look at the schema in the database there, I mean, there's like thousands of tables in there. And it's so to try to figure it out and to have within a context window when you're querying it, be able to try to figure out what table it's going into. It can error out a lot versus where if you have MCP and it's figuring out it is, it's not perfect yet. And I haven't, it's a very new technology. So I haven't really kind of fully seen the full benefit of it, but I know the promise of it is all that sort of work we were having to define the schema and get to the information that was human level work, that the AI will be able to do it much better than we will.
And the promise is that you'll then be able to analyze many more sources of
Yes,
data than you can today, and more easily and more cost effectively than today.
exactly.
Got it. You mentioned that this intelligence accelerator, the Finance Intelligence Accelerator, is a modular solution. Tell me a little bit more about what that means.
Yeah, so it's modular and tiered. So it's, we can, depending, and I keep going back to the example because this is what I'm seeing out in the market today is, so it's tiered based on kind of the size of your company and the amount of data you have. And it's modular in that you can come in and the first thing we do is just some of the smaller companies that we work with, have never really had FP&A before. So you can get just one module that is just here's non-AI power, well, AI under the hood, classical AI and machine learning under the hood, where you're just getting solid sort of a data repository where we help you do your sort of data dictionary, identify your sources of truth, identify the KPIs you want. And then here are the tools. This is what you get. You can't query it as much, but you are at least, you have a steady dashboard, and we're agnostic on Power BI, Tableau, Looker, whatever, whatever you prefer. We're probably going to settle in on one just so we can productize it more and not everything becomes bespoke. But right now we're still experimenting in different clients, like different things. And if they're in a Microsoft environment and they're using Power BI for other things, maybe that makes sense, or they like the visualizations of Tableau better, or whatever the case is. But so you can have that, but then you can expand that by being able to interact with your data. And then we have tools like, there's a forecast tool that there's different ways we pull the forecast. We can do sort of your short-term forecast by pulling from your pipeline in your CRM, or we can do trend, sort of trend analysis and base it on, if you have seasonality in your data or whatever, and we can do on the fly machine learning algorithms that will go out or complex forecast time series forecasts, and we can build out updated based on your current information. And then so there's the sort of the variance analysis, and there's different pieces you can get. The idea is if we can help get that baseline in there, and then the company can sort of bento box add on the different features and functionalities that they want.
All right. And for clients that have adopted this, what measurable outcomes have they seen?
Yeah, so it's funny. One of the businesses they were relatively new, they're not in the hyper growth phase, but a relatively new startup, and they didn't have a lot of information, and they had, reporting and trying to raise money and all that. So they spent a significant amount of time on monthly forecasting. And by building in these automated forecasts, they saw literally an 80% reduction in the time spent on monthly forecasting and it was, it's kind of tough because they are up and down still and kind of in that new, but the trend line is up. And so, the forecasting we're only a couple months in on this, but they're seeing, that it's better. It's, again, startup incomplete data, but their forecasts are much more accurate than they were as well. And they're getting to finally now it's like, you know what? Now I trust this. And so that increases their sort of cash flow projections. And actually the cash flow module is one that I left off. And that's one that has been that people have loved. It's interesting, again, dealing with the smaller businesses, there a lot of them weren't doing cash flow projections. So we can quickly have a that's updated every day. Your 13-week cash flow forecast is one of the modules. And so people are very confident in that. And a lot of the businesses we work with, it's been very eye-opening that they hadn't, they look at their P&L and their sort of their accounting treatment, but that's not, the true cash statement. So that's been great. And some of it's been very simple, like just having this sort of unified source of truth that sales, finance, and operations all agrees to. It's like they have not, maybe finance is reporting things one way, but sales reports it another way. And when we come in, part of our process is we're going to help you define these sources of truth and help you. These are the KPIs you're measuring. Okay, let's all agree on this is how we measure them. This is what the formula for that. And then to my point earlier, there's sort of like this, when you start to trust it and you start to see the benefit of it, you have this faster and more agile, data-driven decision making coming from the leadership.
What clients or type of companies is this project best suited for?
So I would say right now, let's see, I'm really liking our e-commerce implementations here where we're able to just build in this sort of cohort analysis and churn projections and all that. So super excited for e-commerce. We've done a couple of service industry, even like time and materials companies, and we're able to help them visualize capacity utilization and like staffing for their new client engagements. Those have been two big ones. There's one I'm still building out. I know this is going to be valuable, but it's been a bit too. It's been a bit tough to tackle, but I'm really trying to work more to build out this manufacturing tool where we can really help them laser in on sort of more just-in-time inventory management and all that. So doing the sort of the projections on inventory that we were doing on the revenue side, and these are for companies that aren't already in some big planning module and all, so more like the SMB up into the small mid range that has been relying on tracking inventory in their inventory module in the ERP that they're using, that we can give them some additional forecasting tools to go with that.
Gotcha. For a CFO or a finance leader who's curious about AI but unsure where to begin, what's like a low risk, high return place to start?
Yeah, I think the easiest place to start is probably in like variance analysis. It's generative AI, if as long as you have the data in the right format. And I'm not even talking about if I build out this whole, the whole database that has all of your data into it. I'm talking about you could, just the straight off the shelf online, the going to ChatGPT or Gemini or anything that has sort of the code interpreter and ability to write code. So out of that, I would say probably ChatGPT and Claude are the best. But putting your sort of budget to actuals or sort of your monthly or quarterly financials, loading them in and getting the insights from generative AI, where it can pick up on trends or find correlations and all that. So that, I think the easiest way to get in starts with the off the shelf projects that is just train your team on it, come up with guidelines of what they can use and when, and give them the guardrails, give them the tools, whether it's Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever you want to use for the company. Have an open environment where people can talk about how they're using it, and you want your SMEs and your sort of data city and other people in the company to talk about it or to be participating so that they can know, hey, we don't need to upload this here, or this is how we use this. And so if somebody's doing something that they maybe think that is a good use of these LLM powered chatbots, but they don't realize the potential for hallucination or whatever if they're using them incorrectly. So having this open environment where they can talk, but then once you do that and you start seeing, okay, this actually it's a thought partner. It's shifting that mentality from traditional software where here's my input, you give me this one output, where it's a more collaborative. It's here's the input, be a thought partner, tell me what you see here, give me your analysis, asking those probing questions and kind of going back and forth. It's that level of analysis. And then once they see that, that's when people start getting hungry for, okay, wow, what if I actually had this incorporated into my systems, into my workflows, where I wasn't having to pull them out and come, do it in this web-based interface.
Yeah, yeah. And for finance leaders thinking about the future, what should they be doing now if they want to be prepared for the next 12 to 24 months of AI evolution? I would imagine part of it is looking at your data and getting it organized. But yeah, what should they be focused on?
Yeah, it's data. Again, I always go back to data, data, data. And, assuming you have it there, you've addressed that as we've discussed previously in the show. It's figuring out how to get your team ready for it. And there's two ways to look at this. There's you want two kinds of digital experts. We'll call them the citizen experts that are domain experts in sales or marketing or ops or provisioning or finance or accounting or whatever, where they have their subject matter domain expertise, and then you're training them on how to use the technology. Now, these are not people who are going to turn into machine learning engineers or whatever, but if you show them some basic prompt engineering, help them understand how the models work, why they're giving you this answer, and why it's probabilistic and it's giving you this response versus a deterministic response, which is like what you get from your calculator or from what classical machine learning, and having them sort of understand the landscape. That's the citizen expert in AI. But then on the other side of that, you'll have your actual technical experts that are your IT, your technology people, your programmers, but then training them on the marketing side of things or the finance side of things. And you do this sometimes by embedding. If you have a big enough team and you can say, here's my technical people or my FP&A people, we're going to actually embed them. You're the FP&A person who's reporting for operations, so I'm going to put you in that team. Or you're the data person that works for operations, I'm going to put you in that team. So they kind of learn the expertise around that. But this is what I just described there that's going to be that and 1,000 agents running around or 10,000 agents running around the company, AI agents teaming up with the people. But to be successful, you're going to need to be one of those levels of technical experts, domain expertise with understanding, or technical expert with understanding of the domain. And that's where I would be working to get my team built up on that side.
Yeah. When it comes to data readiness for finance leaders of SMBs who are curious about whether they can use AI in some of the ways that you've described, what is data readiness? Like, how do they know if their data is ready or not?
Yeah. So great question. And here's a perfect example. So I have a client that I've been working with for over a year now, and they came to me wanting a generative AI solution for basically some allocations of some of their expenses and all that. And, we got to looking at it, and I knew from the beginning it was going to be just let's flip a switch and wave the AI magic wand and be a solution for them. But as we started digging in, we realized some of the allocations, the rules they had around their allocation. They're a company that has subsidiaries in 20 different countries, and they had this massive chart of accounts, and there were things that didn't match up between the different subs, and it was just a nightmare. There's the transfer pricing and all kinds of complexities in their data, and it was just a mess every month when they tried to aggregate and consolidate all their financials. And I thought what they had to realize is we can't do anything with this data because it's not consistent, and we don't have rules and we don't have all that. So we had to go back with them and actually start with, hey, we need to define your processes. We need to look at your chart of accounts. We need to revise all this. We didn't do a full ERP implementation, but we did have to change their GL in the way that they were reporting and rolling up all these subsidiaries and all that. So it took quite a bit of time just to get a handle on, these are how we're defining the regions. These are how we're defining the departments. These are how we're allocating costs across all of them. This is how we're allocating revenue and all that. And so it's been a whole lot of work, but we've had incremental gains, and we haven't even touched AI yet. So now, though, we've even gone back to the past couple of years and sort of cleaned their historical data, so they have this great view into it now, and they have a better understanding of their business. But this is just sort of clean accounting and clean data. So now they're in a place where we're starting to look at, okay, now we know that this is a process, and how can we automate the steps from in the monthly close as we're bringing in stuff from all the different countries. We can apply generative AI to sort of standardize some of this and to identify and detect anomalies. But that data can be everything from chart of accounts to accounting treatments to allocations to identifying if you have, in your CRM, you might have a lead or a prospect that has information in there, and this is listed as the primary contact, the billing contact, but then you go into your accounting system, completely different billing contact, and you haven't defined which one's a source of truth, and they're not even connected. So it's really about just identifying that sort of it can be customer flow, it can be human flow, but identifying the processes that people do within your company, and then how the data flows within the company, and then sort of mapping that, identifying where the roadblocks are. And it's funny, the roadblocks in process usually correspond with a break in the data flow as well. So it's it's almost like an ISO audit or something when you go through and look at that. But that's kind of the first step of doing these data cleanups. And I think that's why a lot of companies, it's not just the expense, it's the amount of work. It's why we've been talking about, air quotes, digital transformation for 30 years. And it sounds like it's something that you would do and it'd be one and done, but it's really an ongoing process. And it's the real interesting thing is, I think generative AI is maybe finally the thing that's going to get the laggards, people who still are just have all these different data silos. It's going to be the thing that makes them get their data house in order, because they're starting to realize, wow, this is what I'm going to miss out on if I don't do this.
Yeah. And so it sounds like pursuing an AI strategy within your finance organization has the potential to increase the speed with which you can report, the accuracy with which you forecast, but also it will force you to clean your data, which is going to generate returns in many other ways too.
Exactly. And it's funny that I come through it with the view of CFO, because I was a very sort of data driven CFO, and it's just kind of the way that I ran the office in my whole career. But a lot of the stuff we talked about, I don't know if it's going to be. It doesn't have to be led by the CFO's office, but it's across the company. But this sort of improving the data across all departments helps all departments. And if you have visibility into operations metrics and into sales and marketing metrics, that helps you better. It helps you do your finance job better. And by having that information and turning it around and being able to tell sales, this is why your forecast is off. Here's the data driven forecast that you do, helps sales get better, and marketing spend and operations investment decisions, and your CapEx spend and all that. By having all these systems integrated and understanding the data flow through and being able to do project level accounting by cleaning up all of your data, this is the promise.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for people listening who are finance leaders, they work within the office of the CFO, or they are the CFO, who should reach out to you? What types of people, whether company size, you mentioned a couple verticals that you've been focused on recently, but what types of personas should reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not working with any. Well, I am working with one enterprise client right now on a data engineering project, but most of the people that I work with are, we'll say mid cap, 100 million to up to a billion in revenue. And those are ones who have more, typically someone in that range. I do work with some construction firms in that range that don't really have a lot of data sophistication yet, but that we're working on that. So, I would say at that mid cap range, they normally have a better budget for it, and maybe have some internal teams and have some existing data maturity. And with them, it's easy to do like incremental, because they already have dashboards, and usually at that point they already have it. And so we can make incremental changes and give them advantages. But I'm really surprised at what we're doing in the SMB space, the under 100 million in revenue. We're able to make foundational shifts in these companies with by getting them to this sort. I mean, for lack of a better term, what we're really helping them do is finally get that digital transformation. Some of them having FP&A for the first time in their company. They could be a $50 million a year company and didn't have true budgeting before, didn't have true forecasting before. And by setting it up this way, we give them the dashboard, but also what's behind that is, let's kind of put on your accounting big boy pants. And we work, and that's on the private side. We do work with microcap companies as well on the public side a bit, and do some stuff there. And we do some pretty cool things with automation of sort of some of the technical accounting and compliance tasks too. So I don't know. I think I just told you everyone is who should reach out to me.
All right. Well, hopefully you get a lot of responses. Awesome. Glenn, I really appreciate you coming by. Just curious, going deep into how AI can transform the finance function and what you need to do to prepare for that transformation. So thank you again.
Thank you.